Hey, so apparently the only way I'm going to get decent audio quality is just to do video, or else Discord makes me sound like a lispy weirdo. So, yeah, I'll just leave it pointed at the ceiling, and so you don't have to stare at my ugly mug. Um, as I probably rant to you for the next half an hour. I'll try not to make it that, but you know how it goes with me. Yeah, I appreciate your response. Thank you. You said you had so much to say from just my typed questions. You didn't even know about the video, so I'm really excited to hear what you have to say when you fully respond to the video. But yeah, you took the time to answer each of the three questions I gave you, and so I'm going to respond to each of your answers in the same order. So the first question I posed to you was, how are we as humans at all responsible for anything that we do, given that God has perfect knowledge? And you broached the topic by introducing how authority interacts with morality. And that's great. It's a great place to bring this discussion. That's where I would have expected it to go, because that's where the rubber meets the road here, right? We're trying to figure out, who has what level of authority over the world, right? And knowledge and awareness and intent all are very important when discussing issues of moral judgment or condemnation. And we know this from criminal law, right? Mens rea is all about did you intend to do a wrong and bad or evil thing, right? So you said something interesting. You said that God created everything, but he doesn't necessarily cause everything. I have trouble squaring that. I think from a logical standpoint, when you're dealing with a perfect creator, that doesn't make sense, right? I could only make sense of that concept if it was an imperfect creator, where an imperfect creator could potentially unintentionally cause something bad, even if they didn't mean to. This is our fear with AI, right? That our creation is going to get away from us and it's going to turn the tables and conquer us, right? Well, this is only possible, potentially possible, because humans are imperfect beings with limited knowledge. Some junior programmer could just have one typo in the code, and here come the robots. I mean, it could be as stupid and simple as that. Humans are just kind of silly, stupid creatures that are very limited in our knowledge and ability, right? And certainly compared to an all-powerful, all-knowing, perfect creator God, right? When we try to draw these comparisons between the relationship we have with our Heavenly Father is parallel and analogous to the relationship earthly kids have with their earthly parents, there's no comparison at all, right? Because in the earthly parents and children situation, and I'm going to talk more about this later, but you have all imperfect agents that are just trying their best to get it right. And hopefully it's the case that most of the time the parents are right, but there could be situations where the kids are going to be right and the parents got it wrong, and the kid has to call out the parent for being wrong. That's possible just because parents are humans and they could be wrong. That's just a fact, right? So this is not the case with God. And so in your example, when you talked about you have authority over your household, it's your responsibility to maintain it properly, and whether you gave the example of what am I going to cut the grass today or am I going to build a shed, and you said just because God knows well in advance which one I'm going to choose, it doesn't take away from the fact that I still have this authority and responsibility to maintain my household. Well, here's the thing. I want to stay away from examples that are morally neutral, right? Because it's pretty inconsequential morally, whether you cut the grass or build a shed, just stated in that way. However, if we up the stakes and we make it literally life or death, well, now we can observe something interesting there. Let's say that you randomly decide to cut the grass instead of building the shed. You feel like, I don't know, it's a certain time of day and the way the sun is shining on your lawn, you want to get some vitamin D. You really want to soak up the sun. So you're like, all right, I'm going to go cut the grass so I can get a little tan on my face. So let's say that's your arbitrary reason for choosing to cut the grass instead of building the shed. Perfectly innocent, harmless reason to choose to cut the grass instead, right? Nothing wrong with getting a little sun, right? It's good for you, actually. It's actually good to get, like I said, get the vitamin D and everything, right? Okay, so, but turns out in this example, because you chose to cut the grass, you ended up putting yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a criminal who's running away from the cops, who I don't know, maybe he stole some jewelry or something, maybe something worse if you want it to be. The criminal stumbles into your lawn, like maybe trips over you because you were there cutting the grass, right? And then you happen to be wearing a similar looking outfit to the criminal, and the police mistake you for him, and then they shoot you, and you're dead. You get killed. And then to add insult to injury, in the chaos and confusion, the criminal takes advantage of that, and then he gets away. Okay, so you, the innocent, good, hardworking family man who was just trying to do the right thing and maintain his household and support his family, you get punished for doing the right thing in that situation, and he gets away with it. This is the injustice of the world that we atheists complain about, right? This really is a lot of the world, right? We constantly see good people being punished for doing the right thing and evil people being rewarded for doing the wrong thing. Right, and I know we see the opposite too. I'm not trying to say that that's the whole world, right? I haven't devolved into complete nihilistic cynicism yet. Okay, but the fact that this goes on a lot in this world, and it seems like we have again this extremely powerful and authoritative creator God who simply just chooses to do nothing. So I think that God really has to answer for some of this stuff. He doesn't have to answer for all of it. I can dig some shared responsibility, but I think God needs to own up to what he's done wrong. In fact, if God came down here and just very genuinely and with all humility and vulnerability said, you know what, Marshall, I've been hearing what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. I have part of the blame here, right? I should have taken better care to create a little bit easier of a world. I should have made it so that I should have been more clear about what the consequences of eating the apple were going to be. You had no way of knowing, and almost no way of knowing what was really going to happen there. And I'm sorry, Marshall. I'm sorry. Do you know how far that would go for me if God did that? Seriously, I'm genuinely saying this. I'm not saying this as some kind of joke. Like, not only would I respect the guy if he did that, I might even love him because that's so honest and so real, right? It just seems so convenient that God gets to get the credit for everything and the blame for nothing, right? Especially in that situation that I gave with you, right? If you had no way of knowing that choosing to cut the grass was going to get you killed. It's horrible, and this kind of stuff happens to humans all the time. This sort of just random misfortune, right? Does God care about this at all in any way? Right? And it gets worse when we get to the end of this, right? Because that's where we get to the child rape. Okay, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse. But it sort of seems that God is like gatekeeping knowledge, right? As a game designer, I have struggled and toiled to learn the best way to do things, and I've over the years I've learned that, man, if I had known this years ago, this would have been a lot faster. Well, I don't gatekeep that kind of thing, right? When a junior designer comes along and they're going through like a similar problem, I say, oh yeah, just do it this way. Yeah, it'll take you like 5 minutes. I love doing that, and because they're so appreciative, right? I don't want somebody to unnecessarily suffer through something if I figured it out, right? It's sort of, but yeah, God is acting as this kind of gatekeeper. He knows everything, and yet he can't tell us one thing. Okay. Now that we could go down a rabbit hole with that because your anticipated response is, well, he's telling you everything in the Bible, Marshall. Okay, well, then we have to talk about the Bible and the veracity of the Bible. Okay, so we can, but I think that has to be a separate discussion, or else I'll turn into a massive side rant. Okay, but as far as I'm concerned, God hasn't told me one single thing where I knew it was God telling it to me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? Now, I find it interesting that you brought up the scene from The Matrix, where the Oracle says, you already made your choice before, You already knew which one I was going to choose, right? Like, why, yeah, and explain that, right? And then the oracle says, you already knew which one you were to choose, you already chose it before, right? But you're just coming to me to help explain why you chose it. That's really interesting. It almost sounds like that's suggesting that, like, you know what, the philosophy behind the Matrix is like everything that my philosophy is not, right? Metaphysically, the Matrix, first of all, is suggesting that we live in a matrix, like that life is just a simulation, and there's no objective reality. That, right? Like, that's not my philosophy at all, right? Matrix also is suggesting through this scene that we are completely determined, that our path is set for us from birth, and we have no control over how everything ultimately plays out. Now, I assume you don't believe this because you specifically have cited free will as sort of the solution to the problem of evil. So I'm assuming then that means you believe that humans have free will and we're not determined. At least we're not so hopelessly determined that we have absolutely no control over what we do. That would seem to contradict earlier statements that you've made. Yeah, I mean, free will versus determinism is a massive, broad philosophical topic that we could skip over for now because, like I said, that would take a really long time. I do think you and I probably agree on free will, though. What I would like to get your reaction to, though, is, Calvinists have kind of thrown up their hands on it when it comes to this, right? They said, well, you know what? I think that's true. If God is all-knowing and all-powerful, we are too puny and pathetic to be able to even understand him at all, right? And so really, just give it up to God. God's already planned your fate from the beginning. He already knows if you're going to go to heaven or hell, even, right? The Calvinists, they believe this, right? Predestination. I have no control over what my standards of evidence were going to be. I have no control over, like, how I'm convinced of something. That's just the way my brain works. I try and my hardest to be convinced of something, but if I'm just not convinced, I'm just not convinced. I can't control how my brain works. And so the Calvinists have said, yeah, this makes sense. We're just determined, and just choose nothing and do nothing because God has it all planned out for you. What do you think about that? Do you think it's that they're more maybe philosophically consistent, at least that they're kind of admitting to that? I just would like to get your reaction to that because I assume you're not a Calvinist. Maybe you are, and so then that's going to change the nature of everything I just said. But let me know about that. And then you also mentioned that you're more of like the Hebraic school of thought when it comes to where truth comes from. That the truth starts with the word of God. Metaphysically, we're going to be like very far away from each other there, right? Because I believe that truth comes from objective reality itself. And I think reasoning backwards from the word of God to reality is actually quite dangerous. Philosophically, intellectually, all the things. So, kind of praising faith and emotion over the use of reason, I would flip that around. I think that reason needs to override both faith and emotion. For sure, I'm with the Greeks on this one, okay? I told you, I'm very Western-brained with all this stuff, right? I think the Greeks were right. I think that the like Eastern mystic religions are usually pretty off and wrong. And that's in a later response. You mentioned yin and yang, which that wasn't part of this response, so I'll save that for later. I guess I would summarize my response to your answer here. I want you to talk more about or speak more to the perfection of God and how he can be perfect and yet hold no culpability for the disaster of a universe that this has turned out to be. Okay, so next question was, wouldn't it be better if God just manipulated us, right, into loving him because he's perfect, right? It comes back to perfection again. There would be no, again, I said this in my last video, we just kind of take for granted that, like, freedom is good, right? Free, yeah, no, humans must be free. Yeah, no, if you're not free, that's bad, that's evil, that's wrong. Well, why? Why do human beings need freedom? Well, that's because we are imperfect, right? Donald Trump and Joe Biden might think that they know what's best for us, right? But they don't actually, right? And they could very well be wrong, right? So that's why we can't have things like dictators, because you may think that you're the most benevolent dictator ever. You may have the best of intentions, right? But you could be wrong. You could be forcing people to do things that are bad for them. But if you were a perfect being, God should absolutely rule us with an iron fist. Yes, because that gets rid of the problem entirely. Well, you're perfect. So you literally cannot do anything that's bad or wrong for us. So yes, please manipulate me. Manipulate me every way till Sunday, right? So freedom is only good and manipulation is only bad because we live in an imperfect world and we have limited knowledge, right? I find it a little bit interesting that you said God's not manipulative, he's sacrificial. He showed a sacrificial love, and you pointed to how he sacrificed himself to save us from the curse of original sin. I would like to point out that someone being sacrificial doesn't necessarily make them not manipulative. In fact, this is a tactic that toxic people can use to be manipulative, right? You could say, I would die for you. Look at all these ways in which I've sacrificed for you, and all you have to do is just believe in me. Why can't you just be more grateful, right? This could be very manipulative, right? If the classic case of the man getting rejected by the woman, right? And he goes, if you're not going to be with me, I'm going to kill myself because I would die for you, right? That kind of behavior is can get really unhinged, right? When people say, I'm going to die for you, right? This used to be seen as romantic, but we're kind of realizing in the modern day, actually, this is kind of maybe a mental illness. I think you maybe need some help for that, right? If you would kill yourself for someone, right? I don't know about that. Or get yourself killed, right? Even putting yourself in active harm's way just to try to prove yourself to a woman or something. Whoa, right? So I would just point out that sacrificial and manipulative are not mutually exclusive. Now, I also found it interesting that there was some confusion with the word manipulate. You reread my question and said, maybe you meant that could God manipulate our base elements, or you said base function or something like that, so that we just always willingly, freely, happily choose him and choose to love him. I meant both, actually, because I think that actually is what the word manipulate means, right? You manipulate something, you take the elements of it and you change it to the desired for a desired outcome. Again, this makes me think of my career as a game designer. I manipulate elements all the time in order to produce a certain outcome. And if God is perfect, he would be able to do this process perfectly and have it never turn out incorrect or flawed, right? He could manipulate us and manipulate the elements of the universe to create a perfect situation. Why doesn't he, right? So we come back to that question. You said that God made us in his image, not necessarily in the sense that he has 2 eyes and 2 arms, and nostrils. He's not necessarily he doesn't look maybe a bipedal creature like we are, right? But in the sense that we are capable of love and conscious relationships, sacrificial love. You then went back to the word sacrificial again. That's really the intent, is that we're made to be in love and in consensual communion with other human beings, and we're freely choosing it. We're free agents, free actors that are choosing these things without having to be told or forced to do it. Again, I would just question good, healthy love involves freedom in this world and the way it is. But you could have a world where you could force or manipulate someone into loving you, and it wouldn't be a bad thing. In fact, you don't even need to have perfect knowledge. There are situations that we do and recognize to this day that we would see as good, right? If someone's at the top of a tall building, 20 stories high, and they're going to jump, so that's pretty much going to it's inevitable that they're going to die if they jump. We see it as perfectly not only like sensible, but we morally would applaud and praise somebody if they trick someone into, talking them off the ledge, right? If you can manipulate someone into not committing suicide, that's a good thing, right? Even if you have to completely lie to them to get them to get down. Again, I would like you to demonstrate how manipulation is always wrong, just in and of itself. It's kind of like lying. Lying isn't always wrong, right? If you were in Nazi Germany and you were hiding Jews from the Nazis, and this is a classic example, right? And they said, they come knocking on your door. You have any Jews here? And if you said, oh yes, we do. Like, what? No, that would be the exact wrong, evil thing to do, to give up the Jews to the Nazis, right? Lie your head off in that situation. That is the absolutely correct, righteous thing to do, is to lie to the Nazis, right? To protect the innocent. So again, just keep in mind that these things we kind of take for granted that they're wrong, right and wrong, because we just live in this world where this happens to be the case. But God has no excuse for having a lack of imagination and how to make the world better, right? I could think of ways to make a million ways, maybe not a million. I could think of a couple key ways to make the world a better place. God could think of a million and more ways to make the world a better place, right? So that's my issue. You said that humans, you believe that it to be the case that humans are the only creatures capable of acting against our own nature, or another way you could put that is acting toward our own destruction. Yes, absolutely, I agree with this, and this is a key concept, right? This is why humans need morality. The animals don't need morality because they can't choose to operate differently, right? They just go. They just instinctually go. Humans are weird. We can stall, and we can glitch. And I don't know what to do, and you can just get frozen. You can become, you can, what is it called? Analysis paralysis, right? Where you just there's so many decisions and you're right? I don't know what decision to make. It's that's why morality and having a strong decision-making paradigm and apparatus is so important as human beings. And here's a big thing I realized, okay? I love when I realize that cliches are true, right? And the cliche, knowledge is power, it blew my mind. When I think about this discussion, knowledge is power. Yes, I was like, this makes sense even more for me, right? That's my whole problem, right? Knowledge is power. That's true. That's true in every way you think about it. The more you know about something, the more control and power you have over it. When you know more about yourself, for instance, you know how you operate, and you know that if you buy a cake from the store and you leave it on your counter, you're going to eat the whole damn cake if it's in front of you. If you understand that about yourself, you know that, right? You can prevent yourself from being unhealthy by just not buying the cake. Because you know that if you buy it and it's in your house, you're going to eat it all in one night. Right? So having knowledge makes you more powerful. God has been defined to be all-knowing. So therefore, that would have to make him all-powerful. It makes sense that these qualities all go together. The problem is that they also contradict each other. So when you get to infinity, right? When you reach infinity, these concepts start to break down. I'm perfectly okay with the idea of partial or shared responsibility, but only when it comes to if all of the agents involved in this are imperfect, right? Earthly parents and earthly kids can have the kind of relationship where hopefully the parents are in the right, maybe a good 80% of the time, or just most of the time, right? But sometimes parents can get it wrong, and the kid knows that the parent got it wrong, and they call you out on it, right? My daughter loves to do this all the time, and when she's actually right and I was wrong, I have to absolutely say, yeah, I'm sorry, Arya, you were right. Because if I don't, how destructive and damaging that would be. She wouldn't trust me anymore. If I just said, no, I'm your father and I'm right, right? But if it turns out that she was actually right and I was actually wrong, that's very damaging to our relationship, right? So absolutely, truth matters. The truth matters, right? Very much so. And that's ultimately what we're trying to get at here, is the truth, right? Now, I also would like to hear from you. Why do you think that God even created people in the first place? Right? This is always a very interesting question that comes up, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Why did God create us at all? Was it pure boredom? Right? It seems like there wasn't much incentive to, for a perfect being to like run an experiment. Actually, you get to this later, so I'll go. I'll circle back to that. Yeah. So actually, let's just get to the third question, because that's the meaty one, right? If we have to live in this world and toil through it, right? Why couldn't God at least get rid of child rape? Why does child rape specifically have to exist? Among all the other things we have to deal with. To be honest with you, you didn't seem to have a super good answer to this, and that's concerning to me. First of all, I'd like to remind you that the reason we're in this discussion is because this opened with me remembering myself being raped as a child. There might be some toxic people out there who will say, Marshall wasn't raped. I mean, as a kid, you were consenting, so that's molestation, right? Well, if anybody believes that, I would like to never talk to that person ever again and never have them in my life, because they're downplaying the rape of a child. So I'd also like us to treat this subject with some sensitivity. It seems that you wanted to jump to saying it's unfathomably tragic how awful people can be to each other. You have to understand that really stings. It really stings someone who was raped as a child. Like, this happened to me. To hear you say it's unfathomably tragic how awful people can be. It's just such an awful world. Everyone's just so awful to each other in all the awful ways. It's really, really downplaying the specific psychological, lifelong damage that is done when children are abused sexually, abused in any way. But sexual abuse, again, has a very particularly damaging effect that I don't see how you can justify why the lesson that you learn from being raped as a kid, can that lesson be learned in some other way? And a perfect being would be able to figure out the best way to learn that lesson, right? Rather than that. You mentioned that God gives us gifts that he doesn't take those gifts back. I say, if we have to have our children be raped, and and that's the cost of this precious gift of being responsible for the state of the world, or whatever, I don't even know what the gift is supposed to be. That we have free will, but it's sort of like if I were to throw my 4 and 5-year-old out onto the streets and say, "Here you go, my lovely children whom I love. I'm giving you the gift of freedom. Have at it." Is that a good gift that I'm giving my kids, or is that a bad gift? Am I doing something totally evil and destructive by saying I'm giving them the gift of freedom? It would be horrible if I did that to a 4 and 5-year-old. just here you go, you're free, do whatever you want, right? So I say to God, take the gift back, please. I don't want it. Demote me to being an animal, because, and I think about this a lot. I see ducks and they just like swim and play, and they just find food on the ground, and it just seems like a chill, easy existence. They don't have to do anything. There's just food everywhere for them to eat. They can just chill in the pond. You know, like dogs just get to lay around all day. They lay in the sun. They lay where you put them. They go where to go. And you get fed for free. And that'd be awesome. And they don't know any better. They think their life is amazing. Every time you feed a dog the same meal you've been feeding them for 7, 8, 9 years, they love it. It's like the best thing they've ever eaten. Right? So I would love to be an animal. Life would be so much easier. Right? Again, it's sort of a lot of these concepts that I think a lot of theists and God-believing people take for granted. And I'd just like to point them out, that they're not super obvious. You said something very interesting, that God, you said, in order to create something absolutely beautiful, you have to risk that it could end up horrendous or hideous, I think is the word you used, hideous. Depraved is another word you used. Really? Can we say that God is somebody who's capable of taking risks? He risked that it could turn out badly because there was the chance it could be perfect. I don't think it makes any sense at all to say that God can take risks. An all-knowing being can't take risks. An all-knowing being can't be disappointed in an outcome, right? You can't shock God or trick him or manipulate him. You can't get past the guy. He's infinitely smarter than you. So, yeah, I think it doesn't make sense at all to say that you've disappointed God. You should know what you were going to do well before you did it and had plenty of time to cope with your bad decision. And you also can't say that God takes risks, because nothing is risky for God. He knows exactly how it's going to turn out. There's zero risk and 100% return. Well, apparently there's not, which doesn't make sense to me, right? God isn't getting something that he wants from us, even though even though there should be no risk to him with anything he does, because he's all-knowing, all-powerful. The reason I wanted to revisit the whole God was bored thing is because then you kind of said, like, you kind of almost pointed out the idea that, like, God would be okay with us, like, kind of going around and finding these predators and putting them to death, right? Like giving them all the death penalty or something. You said, like, basically, like, if you rape a child, you've stated that. Well, you didn't say this, but this is kind of my own interpretation. It's like you've said, like, I don't want to be a human anymore. I don't want to be treated like a human. It's the laws of the jungle. I just satiated my primal lust, right? And so that's how I want to be. And so you said that you should be killed, right? You should be that you're an aberration or abomination of God's design, and so you should be killed. And so almost implying that, like, our purpose then is to go around, like, killing rapists. I might have misunderstood you a little bit, but what I would say to that, though, is this why God created us? Is it just the entertainment factor of, like, watching us go through horrible things and then, like, we get all powerful from it and it's like a hero underdog movie, right? And, like, God's just, like, cheering us on. Again, really weird, given that God knows the ending and it's a movie he's probably seen play out in his mind an infinite number of times. So, these are all these things I'm trying to make sense of. This did end up being a half hour long, well over that. So, definitely posting this to YouTube so that I can give you the link. All right, I'll shut up now.